Fairbanks, and on this episode of The Passionate Patternmaker, I am here with Cassie Castillo. Cassie, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Cassie Castillo, and I'm the designer for Primrose Dawn. I design PDF sewing patterns for lingerie.
And so how did you get started in this crazy world? You can go all the way back to when you were like a wee little toddler sewing.
All the way, we'll go back to the beginning. Well, my mom is a sewist. She sewed a lot of my clothes when I was growing up. I've always been interested in fashion and in clothes. And just going to the fabric store and picking out fabric and patterns was really exciting for me. And I would say I've loved lingerie from the beginning. One of my favorite things to wear was this little tricot slip that I think one of my relatives had given me, and I never wanted to take it off. And so that was what I wore at home all the time. And I remember my mom telling me, we have to go to the store. So that means you have to put on real clothes. And I just didn't want to take it off and have to put on a t-shirt and shorts. So I would say I had that love from the beginning. Somebody else gave me a little pair of underwear that had ruffles all over the back. And I always tried to wear them backwards because I said, I want to look at the ruffles. And my mom says, no, you have to wear them the right way. So that was fun. And
how young were you during these?
How old was I? I don't know,
yes.
4 or 5, something like that. And not 15. Although, funny story about when I was a teenager, we never sewed underwear. That I don't recall there even being patterns available for that when I was a teenager. It was just, tops and pants and dresses, things like that. And so my mom would just buy me packages of underwear from the store, and it was always full cut briefs, white full cut briefs. And when I was a teenager, this was the 90s, right? The low cut, like a super low rise pants were all that you could find, and they weren't flattering on anyone, especially not me. And that does not, it's not compatible with white full cut briefs. And I kept asking my mom, can you give me a different style? This, my underwear's sticking out of my pants. It's really embarrassing in the locker room. And she says, well, just roll them down. so I'm in the locker room rolling down the underwear waistband on my, trying to get it to stick underneath my pants. And so I kept thinking, when I'm a grown up, I'm going to buy whatever underwear I want. And it's not going to be white. So I don't think I've owned a pair of white underwear since then. So it's liberating to be able to make your own and wear styles that are compatible with the other clothes that you're wearing.
Yeah.
So after high school, I still love fashion, and I went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, and I got a degree in fashion design. And I worked in the fashion industry for 8 years. My first job was with a company that designed underwear and sleepwear and loungewear. And I was an assistant designer, and I got to work with all the women's designers. I think there were 6 of them. So I got to see a whole range of the process, from panties to packaged camisoles and yoga pants to just the different sleepwear sets and things like that. It was a really interesting introduction. So I worked there for 4 years, and then I got another job working in junior sportswear. And that was a lot more fast paced. I think we had a new collection every single month. So that was a lot of hours.
Yeah.
But I got to see more of the fitting and pattern making process. We had an in-house sample room, whereas at my first job, everything was done overseas. So I got to see a lot more of the fitting process, got to talk with the pattern makers and see the sample cutters, things like that. So that was really neat. And at both jobs, I was the stand-in fit model. I was the employee with the closest measurements to the professional fit model. So when we were in a pinch, they would use me. So I got to learn a little bit more about the fitting process, and that was really interesting. And it was also enlightening to me to learn just how different my figure shape is from a standard fit model. So that helped me with sewing my own clothes, figuring out like, okay, I tend to be bigger here and smaller here and things like that. So that was a really interesting process. And during that time, I had taken up knitting as a hobby, and I started designing knitting patterns just in my off time for knitting magazines and yarn companies. And then after 4 years at the junior sportswear company, I got married, and my husband joined the military. So we moved away from Southern California. to a military installation where there's no fashion industry jobs. So I started working on my knitting patterns full time. And I did that for a while. And in 2018, I had to give that up. I had a lot of carpal tunnel problems and it just became very painful to knit. So I was sad to say goodbye to knitting. But in that time, I started sewing more for myself again. And my husband encouraged me to start designing lingerie. He said, that's always what you wanted to do. You never quite got to do it in the fashion industry. He said, now you can just do it for yourself. And that's when I think sewing bras was really taking off. I had made a few of the cloth habit patterns, bra patterns, the Watson bra and the Harriet bra, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, okay, I'm going to run with this and see where it goes. So in 2019, I started Primrose Dawn, and I've been going since then, designing underwear, bras. Now you can see my chemise behind me. I'm branching out into sleepwear, and it's been really exciting.
That's really cool. I don't think I actually I didn't know you went to FITM.
Yeah, I think you did too, right?
I taught there.
Oh, you taught there. Wow.
Yeah, I taught there. I taught there from, I think about 2004 till 2012.
Oh, okay. I just missed you. I graduated in 2003.
Oh, okay.
What did you teach there?
I started up in San Francisco, and I actually taught. I started with the industry sewing class because that's where they start all the new teachers. And it was nerve-wracking and scary the first time I ever taught. Basically, I was scheduled to teach the 12 o'clock class or the 12:30 class, but I showed up for the 8:30 class, and I would sit there and take notes from the other teacher and turn around and teach exactly what I just learned how to instruct at the 12 o'clock class. So I was like, okay.
Well, I think it's good because they use industry professionals, which I appreciated, but not all of them had teaching skills. So I had some classes where I felt the instruction was very much lacking.
Well, and they encouraged me to really do that, to actually shadow a lot of different teachers to see what their teaching styles were. Because I had been honestly teaching kind of out of my studios, or even when I was in college, I would teach a friend how to sew, and I would get so frustrated with her that I would just sew it for her. And it's actually really funny. I ran into her in San Francisco like 10 years later. And we ended up in the same circle. So she was still doing designing, and she was still doing terrible at sewing.
Oh, no.
I was like, it was my fault that she didn't do well. But yeah, so I started in the industry sewing classes, and then I started doing, I did some of the pattern. I think I did one of the pattern making classes. I did a couple collection development, and then I slid into draping. And so I've always loved draping. Like I taught myself how to drape. I, saved up all my money when I was 13 years old and went over to Cloth World and bought myself one of those styrofoam dummies. And, it was a terrible shape. It didn't really, like, my body was a very different shape from it. But I taught myself how to do that. And so, like, when I got to start teaching, I was like, I realized how much I actually loved doing it. So it was fun. And so I was in San Francisco for, I think, around 6 years. And then I moved down to LA to teach full time. And when I went down there, I actually helped develop the draping program. Well, they already had a draping program, but we decided to kind of revamp it. Not really the first level. So I was pretty much taught all the second level. And we really taught it from a creative process. So usually, like, your introduction to draping, it's more like, this is how you pattern draft on a dress form.
Yeah.
And, we wanted to step past that and really kind of push people's creative process. And so when we decided to do, the draping for the second one, it was all like, okay, throw everything out the window that you have learned in draping one. We're going to experiment. And then let's see, hey, just something you learned from level one, could it improve what you're doing now? And so it was a nice bridge to really let people's creative juices go. So long story short. But
I wish I had had a draping class like that, because that you described it very well, just pattern drafting on a dress form. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And when I was there at FITM, it felt like a lot of the curriculum was starting to be really outdated. Like there was a strong emphasis on creative fashion sketching. And I don't know, in the 8 years I worked in the industry, I never once did a cute fashion sketch. It was all just technical flats, and I really wish we had focused more on that.
Were you in LA, or were you at Orange County, or where were you at?
My first year I was at the Orange County campus, and my second year I was at LA.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, but they've actually closed it.
Which one? The Orange County?
Well, yeah, that one, but FITM in general.
Really?
I don't know if there's any parts of it still going, because I believe they sold to another school. So I don't even know if FITM as a school exists anymore. They closed
Wow.
San Francisco years ago. They closed the Orange County and the San Diego campuses, and then I think the last one was the what do you call it, the LA campus.
Oh, wow.
So I have, when I went there, I didn't go by the school. I was a little sad.
Yeah.
Because I used to have a really great museum there.
Yeah.
Love going in there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I mean, all these design schools are disappearing. Some of the state schools have picked up some programs, but it's kind of sad. Like I really hope that it is continued to be taught. Even I think there's a lot of misconceptions with what people think is fashion design. It's like, oh, okay, I love shopping, I like making pretty things, but there's so many technical skills that go into it. And I just don't think it's as respected as it should be.
Yeah, I was really shocked when I started working in the industry, just how many people who designed did not have any sewing skills. And I thought, how can you not have sewing skills if you want to design? You have to know construction and things like that for a design to make sense. I remember we had a guest designer come in. He used to be a designer for, I think it was Halston, big design brand. And he was having an attitude with the student that was sitting in front of me because she had designed this evening gown with a big slit up the front but no seam above it, and he was kind of yelling at her in this mean way, saying, you can't have a slit with no seam above it, the fabric would just tear. And he's going on and on. This girl was about crying, and I was like, geez, give her a break, she doesn't know. Like, so it helps if you know things like that, fabric properties and things like that. You can't, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of people who think, well, I like clothes, I can design. But yeah, there's a vast amount of technical knowledge that you need for designs to make sense and to work.
Yeah, I really wish that it was the pattern making was offered at more technical schools.
Yeah.
Because it really is. It's something that is absolutely needed. And yeah, I know people are going into digital, 3D pattern drafting, but you still have to understand the basics of pattern drafting and fitting, which you get from draping and you get from you have to understand all of it in order to succeed. And so it's like, if people are going to keep relying on these digital platforms but never actually understand how to draft, I think it's going to be a skill that's just going to be so lost. I was like, I love drafting. Like, I would sit and draft all day if I could, but then my back hurts.
Yeah. So do you still draft on paper?
Not as much. I created a whole bunch of block patterns. So I actually created a bunch of patterns when I was out in California, and right before we left, I had one of my employees digitize everything. And because I had such a wide variety of things, I was able to I'm actually still working on some of those, because I had a whole bunch of designs that I'm like, oh, I'll deal with them later. Let's just digitize them and then I'll play around with them. So most of what I do now is entirely on the computer. I do print out the patterns because I like to tape them together and see them. And I've played around with Browseware, which is the 3D, and I don't know. To me, I didn't have the time to really dedicate to figuring it out. And I don't know. I'm like, I know it would make my life easier. And I know when Alicia's here for our retreat, she told me she's going to give me a little lesson on that, on like how the 3D works. Because I have a unique trait that when I draft flat, I can see it 3-dimensionally in my head.
Oh, I wish I had that gift.
So it's always been something I'm like, I can draw the lines here, and then I picture it. It's like over here. Okay, if I see where that is, I need to move it, and then I just have to see it on the body to see proportionally where it fits. So I usually am able to make a lot of the drafting just right on the computer, because I can visually see it in my mind. So I think going into the 3D will be very interesting. I probably love it. But I haven't really had the patience to learn it.
And patience and time, man.
Yeah. I know. And time is something that I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't have a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I guess after our little conversation with all of the girls for the spring retreat, you may have a change of heart.
Yeah, man. I'm working on a pattern and the grading is just driving me crazy and things like that, and I'm like, I really need to learn a pattern software specifically for drafting patterns because Illustrator just isn't gonna cut it. So yeah. I need to follow in your footsteps and learn something more professional.
Well, and if you're looking at poly pattern, if you get your pattern, your base pattern done, and if you either digitize it, you can put it into Illustrator, you can send that over to me, and I can actually do kind of a little free demo for you and
Oh.
show you how we could draft or how we can grade it in the software. Since I am the rep of the software, it's in my best interest to show other people how to use it. So if there's a potential that that might be something you're interested in, I'd be happy to, take a little time and actually walk you through it. No, I think that would, I think it'd be almost like my first day, and maybe for you, like your first day of walking into fashion design school, the first class that you ever sat down at and you had like, if you've ever had like the light bulb moment, you're like, oh my God, I understand. I get it now. Like, I don't know if you had that while you were in school, but like the first day of my first class in draping or in pattern drafting, or both of them, I'm like, I just had this like light bulb moment. I was like, I understand how all the pieces go together now. And I think that you'd probably have that once you see it done kind of as a little demo.
Oh, good. I did sign up for the free course that you have on your
Cool.
website, so I just haven't had time to explore it yet.
Yeah, no, and it's mostly screenshots, so it's not video, so you don't have to worry.
Yeah.
You can really go at your own pace. But I really like it. Some of the things have changed. I was actually thinking this morning, as in the shower, thinking about things I need to be doing. I was like, I should probably update some of the graphics because I think I did that originally from version, let's see, 8, I think. So it's actually kind of 2 versions behind.
Oh, okay.
I may have updated it for 9, so 10 has some changes in it. So some of the tools have moved around. So I definitely need to do that, but I can walk you through that.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, so get your questions together. So let's see. You've worked as a designer. Well, you worked as a designer, or is that what you? What was your role at the design companies you worked at?
I started off as an assistant designer, and then I was an associate designer, which is a bit of a misnomer because it was mostly paperwork. I didn't really get to do a whole lot of designing. I really just assisted all the designers in their jobs.
Cool. What is your favorite part of the entire process from initial design to seeing your product sewn and worn by somebody else?
Yeah. Wow.
What's your favorite?
Probably just the initial design process, coming up with all the design options and just watching it all kind of come together, what I want to offer as a pattern. It's important to me to offer multiple design options in one pattern. I want people to feel like they're getting their money's worth and be able to make a few variations without it just looking like a copy of a copy of a copy. So I really enjoy doing that. And then when I test the pattern, getting to see other people sew it up, that's really exciting for me because then it's gone beyond me. It's, started to make its way into the world.
Yeah, I love the whole process too. I often have when I first start getting into the testing phase, I usually have this little imposter syndrome come up that's like, should you really be releasing this now? Is it ready? Like, can somebody actually sew this together? Like, I don't know if that's just me.
No, I have the same thing. I lay awake at night. I'm like, oh my gosh, is it gonna go together? Is it gonna be horrible? Are people gonna hate it? It's like when I've already invited people into the testing group, but they haven't started it yet. That's when I'm laying awake at night having those same sort of feelings.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be terrible. And you know what? I've never had it go like that badly before, so I don't know why I feel like it's gonna go that way. But I do.
Yeah, I know. I had one pattern I tested, and we probably got too many testers to do the early testing. But there were a few pattern changes I had to make, and then we already had like 10 to 20 people testing this thing, and I'm like, we just started way too big. Like, had I started with like 1 or 2 people, say, okay, I'm my large size. Let's someone to test the small size. Let's see if those 2 work. And I didn't really do that before, because this was actually for my Jackie sports bra. So that was the most recent one I did, I think like 4 years. Is it 4 years ago now? 3 or 4 years? Something like that. I don't know. It was a while ago. And I based the whole pattern on my other patterns. So I copied a lot of the grading, and I don't think I actually did much in the way of testing besides my own size before we got a whole bunch of people in. And it was like after that, I was so overwhelmed. People were like, well, you weren't prepared. And I'm like, no, I wasn't prepared. And so I've kind of taken it a lot slower. So I have one girl that kind of does an initial test. She's, I think, like either a 28C or a 30C. And so she's kind of on the bottom range of what I work on. So if I can get it looking right on her after I've started with my size, then it usually just needs a couple little tweaking here and there. So then I usually grab in another person who's in the middle of it and say, okay, now you try it. and then I'm like, before the big the release for all the testers, I was like, okay, am I ready? Am I ready? And I never am, but yeah.
I thought of doing a similar process because I usually just go for it and get, my range of testers. I try to get kind of across the whole size range. But I have contemplated doing something like what you're doing where, I'm at one end of the range and then I want to try to get someone at the other end of the range and just kind of do like a pre-test and make sure like, okay, my grading works and it looks okay on the other end of my size range, and then go for everybody. Cause I don't want to have to, by that point, when I'm getting the grading with everybody, the pattern testing with everybody, I've graded the pattern, it's all laid out, it looks pretty, like what if I have to go back and change it? I'd have to redo all of that.
Yeah, and working in Illustrator, it is a lot more challenging for you because when you're doing an Illustrator, you basically have to create your grade when your design is completely done.
Yeah.
And to change one little thing, it's a little bit more challenging. It's like I said, you're going to enjoy seeing the pattern drafting or the grading done on the computer. Are you going to come up here? Sorry, I've got it.
Oh, you got a friend?
I got a little friend. Hey, Sasha, look, there you are on TV. Look right there. You can look. She's like, no. She's like, I want to sit in that lap of yours. Oh. This is Sasha. Do you have any sewing buddies?
Yeah, I have a little dog named Pumpkin. She's a Chihuahua mix. She's asleep on my bed right now. Usually she's in her dog bed that's underneath my cutting table.
What is next on your to-do list?
Well, I'm working on what was supposed to be a really simple knit bralette. It's only 3 pieces. It has a princess seam, so there's just an inner cup, outer cup, and a back band. And I thought this was going to be like a quick and easy pattern for me to develop, and the grading is just really throwing me for a loop because I want to have it in cup sizes, and I'm finding it difficult to grade. Kind of with the integrated cup and band, how do you make everything match up? And I think I've been working on this for 2 weeks now. Oh. I think I might have finally gotten it though. I had kind of a eureka moment. I even enlisted my husband's help. He's into he has more of a science brain than I do. He's into physics and things like that. So I was describing to him what I was trying to make happen, from like a sciencey kind of point of view. And he just looks at me, he's like, I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, my husband's been my sounding board too. I'm like, wait, I'm trying to do this and I can't figure it out. And sometimes we're so close to it that we just don't see it.
Yeah.
Like, we don't see the tree between the leaves, right? Is that how the saying goes? Maybe it's
something
wrong.
Like that, yeah.
But yeah, it's a three-piece pattern, but they can be really complicated depending on kind of how you want it to be. Do you have a sample behind you? We'll get a sneak peek.
Yeah, it's just right here. Yeah, it's just one of these. I mean, just the little simple bralette, but yeah, trying to get it in cup sizes, because normally with patterns that look like this, it's just kind of one cup size and then you just grade it out for a band. Yeah. But what works for me in 32E isn't going to work for someone in 32K. So
yeah, and then when you start looking at the one thing I've discovered is that when you're doing a bra versus a bralette, you have to tackle the grading completely differently because you're not really going around a bra goes around a circle.
Yeah.
A bralette goes more around the body, and it's a little harder to get sometimes that shape, at least in my experience.
Yeah, and looking at your book, Bare Essentials, third edition, that's my favorite way of grading is your way.
Mm-hmm.
And I like doing the percentage cup grading, but I'm like, well, I can't do that because then it changes the bottom widths, which affects the band, width and all that. So I'm like, well, I can't do it that way. But it's a lot easier to just stick a cup into a cradle
Yeah,
to figure
absolutely.
out the grading that way. And I'm like, okay, I need to stick with that.
Yeah, no, and I really, like I said, I spend more time on the grading on the wireless ones than I do on the wired ones. Like the wired ones, I'm like, it's a
Mm,
breeze, I can, once I've got the two sizes, or at least, the one size, I can grade to the other size. And then the rest is generally, it's pretty simple.
yeah,
But when you have something that doesn't have that defined under, because yes, your under bust is going to be the same measurement, but then everything else increases when it's all the same pattern. It just
yeah,
makes it, a little bit more challenging, because I'm like, is it stretch? Is it going to support, or is it going to be a bag? It's like, what is the purpose, and how is it going to look on the body, and how do you want it to look on the body? Those are the things that I've struggled with, is, with the bralettes, were the ones that don't have that defined wire line. It's
yeah,
just, I spend way more time grading those, because it's more to wrap my brain around
yeah.
than, um, and that's probably something I should work on for the next edition of Bare Essentials. So I know I told people I was not going to do another one, but I've been kind of contemplating and tossing around the idea of what I can improve on it and how I can do another edition. And unfortunately, the new edition is going to be even bigger.
No, well, I think that's exciting. I would get it
Yeah,
because there's always more to learn.
yeah,
And especially with the wireless bras, you got to think about your fabric and all that, and where's the support going to come from? Is it going to come from the fabric itself? Is it going to be a design element? You're
yeah.
going
And
to
I
have
didn't.
internal slings, things like that.
Yeah, no, and I didn't discuss stretch at all in it, except for the back band. It's like, what do you do when you are drafting? And so, I mean, it could just be an entirely different book. Maybe I just need to have a stretch lingerie book.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful because I think a lot of people who just sew lingerie and not so much designing it themselves, maybe don't understand just how important your fabric choice is and that the fit can completely change when you change your fabrics. I've
Yeah,
experienced it myself when I'm sewing up my samples for my bra patterns. I change the fabric, keeping all the pattern pieces the same, and then I end up with either more or less support. And which direction you make the stretch go inside the pattern pieces, that affects the fit as well. There's a lot of things to consider.
yeah, definitely. But it's sitting over there, I'm like, I'll deal with that later. Like, I have there's another pattern drafting book that I was working on that I set down 2 years ago. Maybe it was 3 years ago now. After my accounts got deleted off Facebook and Instagram, because
Oh,
I was in full on testing on it, and I was working on it, and I had people commenting in one of my groups on, I was like, oh, okay, on this chapter in this section, comment here. And so I had written the post, and everybody had put their feedback on it, and I was like, I'm going to go back and review this. And then the next day, it's like my accounts were were deleted.
hmm,
And so everything that I had posted and every comment that was posted on it was deleted. And I'm like, was so devastated, because it was
mm,
not just my work, but everybody else's work. And I was like, I can't go back to these people and ask them to
yeah,
redo this. And it just it just was slightly devastating to me. So I put that book on the side, basically on the back burner. I'm going to get back to that. So I actually have a visitor coming in about 4 weeks.
ooh,
Lindsay. Um,
oh,
yeah, Lindsay from So
good,
Busty. She's actually coming here. We were chatting, and I was like, you should just come. Like, we should come and hang out. And this was
hmm,
actually kind of at the very beginning of the discussion of her buying the jet set patterns.
yeah.
And I think this was even before she had agreed to do it, and she booked the plane ticket. I was like, okay, well, we're going to do this. We're going to film an online course for you. So I was like,
Good.
we're gonna have like 5 days of just hanging out. Hopefully, I don't have anything else I have to do.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been keeping track of her progress on Instagram. That's really exciting, and I think she's working in Clo 3D on some things,
Hmm.
and so that's kind of giving me a peek on what that's like, just doing pattern drafting, kind of draping in one of those 3D programs. And like, oh, now something else I need to learn.
Yeah. Well, she's yeah, she's doing the initial drafts with I don't know if she may have actually drafted them in this Clo 3D. And then we exported it to pull it into poly pattern. So we're actually going to take and do the grading in poly pattern and clean it up and do anything else in there. So we're going to play around with that, and this might be top secret. But yeah, she's going to come here. We're going to hang out. We're going to do one of these little podcasts too, so we can have a nice little conversation, because now she's totally in love with doing pattern making as well. And I'm like, but you're a lawyer.
Well, you can have more than one interest.
I know, but she's a full-time lawyer
and a mom. So
yes, with an adorable little boy.
She carves out time for it, but it seems like she does.
Yep. So part of bringing her up in the conversation is that she's going to work with me on that pattern drafting book, because she's tested a bunch of different methods, and I tested methods, and that's kind of how I created what I'm working on. And so I told her, I was like, we're just going to troubleshoot this and see, okay, what works, what doesn't work, because I've gotten a really good fit for myself, but the number of measurements is a lot. So we're going to see what we can do to minimize some of the measurements that we need to take, to see if some of it can be done more mathematically. So I'm kind of excited to do that, because I told her, I was like, I need someone to make me accountable. Like, I need someone to stand here and say, okay, well, what about this? What about this? And I was like, okay.
Oh, that's good. And you know what? I hope it works out, because something that really drives me crazy about my typical pattern drafting textbooks is that they only really work for like a medium size with a B cup. And it's like, okay, what if I'm making it for someone who has a very large bust? You know, is this method even going to work? And there's very little information out there in pattern drafting for various cup sizes.
Well, and the way I'm writing it, it's actually not just I'm trying to do it so it's good for all body shapes and sizes. So excellent. Men, children, women, anything that is whatever somebody wants to look like, we can draft for that. And it's taking all the same measurements. There might be a couple measurements that would be slightly different. So that's why I have so many measurements in this. So we'll probably be able to go through and say, okay, well, this is not going to be necessary if you fall in this range. This measurement's not going to be necessary over here. So because I've done these drafts. I did the pant draft for David, for Emily, and for myself. And I got through the pant draft. So, and the pant draft, I feel like is like one of the hardest ones. So the fact that I was able to do it for both men and women with just the same drafting information, I was really excited about that. So we're doing the same thing with the bodice, is that we're going to be taking a series of different measurements, and based on if it's a male presenting body or female presenting body, it's going to, all of the different measurements, it doesn't matter what they are, they'll still be able to create this. So no more getting 5 different books, one for men, one for women, one for plus size, one's for little boys, one for little girls. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was even talking with somebody yesterday or the day before, and I was like, you know what? Someone could even take these same measurements on a dog or a cat and make cat and dog clothes the same way. Like, I'm like, hey, a cat has a longer space here. I was like, so they can easily draft it for a cat.
Oh, that's so funny. Too bad my dog doesn't like wearing sweaters.
You make skirts.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited. That would be so cool. Yeah, I have been trying to make myself pants, and I just cannot get a good draft. I don't know. There's just a lot of things about my figure shape that I think are not typical. So it gets difficult. So I'll look forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to send off because since the pant one was tested initially, I'd be happy to send those instructions off if you want to play around with them.
That would be fun.
Yeah. So let's see, what else? You said you're starting to work on more sleepwear now. So besides the 3-piece bralette pattern that you're working on, what other type of, I'm guessing, loungewear?
As far as sleepwear, loungewear, I have a pajama set in mind for a little raglan sleeve top and a pant set. So that's going to be probably the next thing I work on after my little knit bralette. My design process, I have all these sketches that I come up with. I find all these ideas, on Pinterest and things like that. And so I make little sketches of design ideas. I have this big folder of them. But really what motivates me to start working on a pattern is when I feel like I have a gap in my wardrobe, like there's something missing, and then I think, okay, well, I'm going to start the pattern for that. It's beyond just a little idea in my head now when I feel like I really want something. And that's really what spurred me to work on the Annika wireless bra, and then the Zanita wireless bra came after that, is I really just wanted a supportive wireless bra. And I had been wearing my Iris bralette for a long time, but that's a knit bralette. So there's only so much support that you're going to get out of that. And I kept thinking, I really want something that's going to have more support, but no underwires. So I did that in a non-stretch fabric for the cups and the cradle on the front. So I feel like I've satisfied that need in my wardrobe now. So now I'm just moving on to pajamas and other things I feel like I need.
That's kind of what I do too. Like if I need something, I'm like, I need a pair of shorts. Okay, let's go draft a pair of shorts, and why not? It's just a few more steps to make it for other sizes, and then hey, I gotta do the testing, and yeah.
We always think it's going to be easy, and then it takes so much time. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can knock that out in a month, and then no. 2 months later, still in it.
Yeah, I made like a princess panel dress. It was really pretty, and I actually made them. I called it my TARDIS dress because I made one for my daughter and myself when we went to the Doctor Who convention. And it's in blue, and it has like the panels kind of like resembling the TARDIS, so I called it my TARDIS dress. And so I have that one, and it's all graded because I did my daughter's size, who was a youth medium at the time, and then I had my size, so it's like I have the range. I have not tested it. I also did cardigans. I'm like some outer some regular ready to wear type things, and not necessarily the lingerie, but I'm like, I need to, I want to branch and to do all the things. But.
Yeah, I think about that too. I enjoy making woven shirts. I find something really satisfying about sewing like the collars and the plackets and things like that. And I think about, making patterns for the ones that I've sewn for myself. And I also make shirts for my husband. And I know there's not lots of men's patterns out there, but I'm like, well, if my customers are used to me putting out lingerie patterns, are they going to want shirt patterns too? I don't know. I don't know if my audience is going to be interested in that.
It can expand your customer base, or you start stockpiling them. So if you have, not like you have a lot of spare time either, but like, yeah. have a couple here and there, and then, it's like, okay, after a couple years, maybe let's say you have 4 or 5 patterns. I'm like, you can slowly roll that out as you're working on other things and see what people are interested in. Because if you just do like one shirt pattern and you don't do another shirt pattern, it might be like, well, that's kind of weird. Why would she just do one and not another?
Yeah, that's why I feel like after this is my Jacinta chemise over there. Mm-hmm. That was my latest pattern. I feel like, well, I need to have another sleepwear pattern so that in my little pattern category on my website, it's not just that one pattern sitting there on the page. And it's like, well, what is that? That's just the one pattern. So I'm like, okay, it has to have a friend to be there next to it on the website and not look so funny.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, look, I have,
that we think like that. Friend.
Yeah, and that's why actually I went and I started creating bundles, of all the different patterns, and it makes it look like there's more in there.
Yeah, I've started doing that too. It's interesting to see what patterns customers buy together. And so then I think about that for the bundles. And also I kind of like to create little sets. So when I come up with a design and I'm picking out the fabrics for the samples, I try to think of what I have that already would kind of match it, because I like to photograph it in sets, like I have on the dress form behind me. Because when I started off, it was just kind of a mishmash of whatever fabrics I wanted. And my first pattern was the daisy briefs. And I just picked out whatever fabrics I liked individually for each design. And then when I created the cover image, I was like, oh, these don't even go together. They look a little funny. So now I try to think up of a color story or color palette and kind of pick fabrics that I know will look nice together in my cover image. So I have to think a little bit in advance. So I'm thinking about sets and what's going to look good in the photos.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of colors, we actually probably need to all get together and figure out what type of colors we're going to do for the spring, for the retreat. Yeah. So I know this last time we kept it kind of simple. Lily did blue, Maddie did some black, and I basically let people just pick and choose what other fabrics they wanted when they were at the shop. So it was a little less organized that way. But this year I would like to, for the next one, I definitely want to have it a little bit more organized. But I'm planning to go to LA in February, so I can always at the last minute pick up any fabrics. If everyone's like, oh, what do we want? We can try and find stuff. But we don't have to have a collection, but
It would look nice though if everyone can kind of go home with something that just looks all nice together, kind of mix and match their pieces.
A mini little capsule collection. Is anything exciting happening in your life that's not design related?
Well, not design related. I spend my non-designing time usually working in my vegetable garden. So I'm about to plant everything for fall. I try to grow a lot of my own vegetables and fruit, things like that. So if I'm not at my sewing machine or in my office, I'm working out in my garden, planting things. And I do volunteer work with the Texas Master Naturalists. So we're a group of citizen scientists, and we do conservation work and public education and all things nature related. So every week I do some volunteer activities, getting out in nature. I do a weekly activity called Stream Team, where we go out to different bodies of water in our local area and do some sort of scientific tests on them to make sure our local water is healthy.
Cool. Like I have a black thumb. I don't have a green thumb.
Well, I started out with a black thumb. I made it turn green.
Yeah, we had a bunch of planter boxes made during COVID. We put them on the side of the house, and I had strawberries, I had tomatoes, and all we've had for the last 2 years are weeds.
Oh, yeah. During COVID, that became really important. The vegetable garden, right? I'd never had that experience before, going to the grocery store and seeing all these empty shelves. And so it just so happened when we had the lockdown here, I had just planted my vegetable garden. So I was out there every day for several hours, with my dog following me around. I'm like, this is important now. I have to grow the lettuce, and all these things that I wanted to eat that it just disappeared off the shelves. I even bartered with my friend. I needed toilet paper, and there was none to be had in any of the stores, and she had like a stockpile at her house. I said, well, I can trade you some lettuce. We traded. It was really funny.
Yeah, because lettuce as toilet paper is not a good idea.
My sister-in-law was asking me, well, what are you going to do if you run out of toilet paper? And I said, well, I have a lot of fabric. She said, what? She was so offended by that idea. I said, I have a lot of fabric scraps. Like, what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, there's reusable wipes. People do that, make reusable toilet paper. So yeah, it's a thing. It's just you gotta wash it.
What people did. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to working with you in the spring.
Me too. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I may have to see how I can get you guys to stay a little longer. Figure out what else we can do. Well, have a great day, and I'll chat with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into my podcast. In my next episode, I have a riveting conversation with Leisha Sanders of Stitch Love Studio. Leisha is one of our featured teachers for the Spring Lingerie Retreat. For more information on the Spring 2025 Lingerie Retreat, go to lingerieretreat.com.